You might be sitting here thinking, oh, I don't know. I'm indecisive. I don't know whether or not I should quit. That tells me, quite frankly, you don't quite know what is the most important thing in your life, the second most important thing in life, the third most important thing. You being undecided means you haven't dug deep enough to figure out what is it that you want right now. And that's okay. It's normal to not know what you want. I want to normalize the indecision, but I want to be clear that there is an answer. And the more time you spend digging into what do you actually give a shit about? When you give yourself the answer to that question, the decision makes itself on its own. Welcome to What the Hélène, the irreverent podcast for ambitious rebels who are ready to unlearn the hustle and start embodying full-bodied freedom. We are going to challenge the commodification of suffering. We're going to embrace the revolutionary act of pleasure and dismantle the systems that suppress our self-trust. Join me as we navigate the unlearning curve, redefine success, and cultivate a life that speaks for itself, full of your own personal fulfillment. Today, we're going to talk about one of the biggest, messiest, most freeing decisions that you may ever face, the question of whether or not you should quit your job. Not from a place of collapse, but from a place of radical self-honesty, because that's how we do everything around here, but also because quitting isn't just about walking away from a paycheck. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that maybe got buried under the need to perform, survive, and prove to someone else that your life was worth something. There's a content warning in the show notes for today's discussion. I don't dive into it too thoroughly, but I'm going to bring it up. Now, I have to start with this caveat of strong privilege. If you are in a position to contemplate quitting your job, that implies to me that you already have a certain level of privilege that you get to consider this. Because a lot of us don't have a choice right now in opting out of capitalism and opting out of productivity. For a lot of folks right now, surviving is contingent upon keeping their job. So contemplating leaving it because they want more personal fulfillment, because they want to feel like they've got a better relationship with their boss, these kinds of nice to haves are just that to someone who is actively struggling to put food on the table because they can only make so much money and they were willing to do anything in order to earn it. And if you are listening to this podcast, there's a very good chance that privilege that you have right now is one where you have a choice. You have a choice. And so it is through that lens that I want you to hear everything that comes out of my mouth today, because it is going to be a dicier conversation. It's not a clear simple yes versus no. It's not just a matter of keeping a job for the paycheck, and it's not just a matter of leaving the job for the sake of personal fulfillment elsewhere, because the grass is not always greener on the other side. And honestly, the bottom line is this: if you suck at lawn management, if you suck at gardening, if you have not invested any time in actually taking care of this grass, it doesn't matter where you go. You're going to be disappointed wherever you end up because you have not learned how to actually caretake for where you spend your time, how you spend your energy, what boundaries you set, because you haven't diversified your identity to mean more than anything that you produce at your place of employment. So if you're already contemplating, should I quit my job? Before you hand in that notice, let's pause, because oftentimes we have to ask ourselves, am I trying to quit the job, or am I trying to quit the job description I wrote for myself? Right? So we're often not necessarily trying to quit what we signed up for. We are quitting what we ended up doing, whether it was a literal job that we didn't sign up for and tasks that were assigned to us, whether it's the responsibility we've taken on emotionally and how important we think our job is. And we're staying up late till midnight, worried that if we don't get the job done, it's going to land on someone else's shoulders. So we've taken a simple fact of employment, a W-2, maybe an 8 to 5, maybe a 7 to 7. We've taken this concept of our labor and we've turned it into something that means so much more about who we are as a human being. And we know, if you've listened to any other episode, that this is a byproduct of the capitalist society that we live in. We know that we have learned to equate our identity as a byproduct of our labor and our ability to produce. And when we get these repeated messages, we are essentially told, and we get to absorb this belief that so long as you keep producing and keep showing up to work, you have value, which is why the thought of quitting your job can feel really scary, really destabilizing, really life-altering. I also want to add in that this question might serve you even if you have not chosen to quit your job, but you might be getting laid off soon. The thought that your job, your place of employment, is no longer where you're going to be getting a sense of validation from, a sense of affirmation from. If you were going to be grieving the loss of what someone valued as your labor, this episode is also for you. Either way, whether you've been fired, whether you are choosing to leave, whether in this economy the jobs are scarce anyway, we have to really consider, for what purpose do you want a job? So before you quit, I want you to get super clear as to why you are quitting. It might be why you're getting fired, or if you don't know why that is, what are all the reasons you're happy that this job is ending, right? Because if you're moving on to another kind of profession or career or another form of employment, it behooves you to get clear on what are the aspects of this employment that have and have not satisfied you, right? So you're going to be doing an inventory. This might be a good time to say, this podcast, you might want to take notes. Go get your pen, go get your paper, pause it, come back to it, listen to it. I highly recommend you take notes because there are going to be journal prompts here that I encourage you to reflect upon, right? And so you might have to fill out the journal prompts on this podcast, but you might want to write them down. Now, if you have any other questions, please, as always, feel free to reach out to me directly. I professionally and personally help people with this all the time. That is literally my job. So the first question you ask yourself is, what are you actually trying to quit? What are the qualities, characteristics, situations, aspects of this job or employment that have ruffled your feathers, that have chafed up against who you are, that are pissing you off, quite frankly, or that you've never quite loved or jived with, right? Get very clear. How much of it is the environment? How much of it might just be you? So like I said, sometimes what we want to quit isn't the job itself. It's also the way that we've been showing up to it. And some of the questions to ask yourself, do I feel like myself at work? How authentic have you been when you've been showing up to work these days? Or have you been showing up as a filtered version of yourself? Have you been showing up in a professional, catered version of yourself? Another question is, how long have you been putting up with what you want to leave? Right? Have you been telling yourself it's not that bad for a very long period of time, just so that you can keep justifying your presence at a place and tolerating disrespect? Because I would submit to you, the issue might not be the job. Now we have to explore the issue of, why have you been letting yourself put up with disrespect for so long? What is the core belief within you that makes you think that's okay to put up with? Why do you think it's okay to justify improper behavior towards you? Like, why do you keep showing up to something that you hate and lying to yourself about how much you hate it, right? That's the piece we want to get to. Yes, we may do jobs that we don't like because we want to pay rent, but it's important that we are honest with ourselves about the fact that, yeah, I'm going to do a job I hate, but I know exactly why I'm doing this job, right? So this brings me to my next and very important question. Besides, what are you actually quitting? For what purpose are you quitting? This is my favorite question that I teach anyone to use all the time. It's a fancy way of asking ourselves why. What is the reason for which I am doing this? Now, you might ask yourself this question when it comes to staying in this job and leaving this job. For what purpose are you keeping this job? Maybe it's for rent, right? Or for money, or for the benefits, the healthcare, right? Get specific on this piece of paper. For what purpose am I keeping this job? And beyond that, with each line item that you've written down, all the logistics, all the benefits, all the salary numbers, I want you to keep asking yourself that question. For what purpose do you want this much money and this much salary? For what purpose do you want that much income per month? Why do you want this healthcare? What is the intention and the deep unconscious motivation for why you are doing anything you are doing in the first place? Not just why are you putting up with this job, but why do you even want a job in the first place? Reconnect to the original reason for why you are here. I've worked with clients before who really did not enjoy showing up to work whatsoever. But when they realized that they were willing to do it for the sake of their children, for the sake of the educational benefits, because they had a roadmap and an exit plan to get out of it, it made showing up to a job that they did not like or that they weren't fulfilled by that much more palatable and that much easier. Because when they showed up to the office, they knew they weren't doing it for the CEO. They knew they weren't doing it just for the paycheck. They were doing it for their kids. And they could tangibly and honestly trace that dollar amount back to, how much does my child need from me that I cannot give simply through love and quality time? Now, there's an argument to be made that the fact that we have to work and buy things to support ourselves is because we have dissolved the village that used to collaborate and co-create and take care of each other. But I'll save that for another podcast episode because, quite frankly, this is already a doozy, and you're already going to have to wrap your head around your why behind why you want to do something. Now, as part of your ongoing assessment of what are you trying to quit and why are you trying to quit it, Do more internal research. Ask yourself the following questions. Am I spending more energy recovering from work than living my life? What would this job feel like if I stopped pretending, if I stopped hiding, if I stopped masking for the sake of professionalism? What would happen if I stopped fitting in? Like, do I want to quit? Or do I want to stop abandoning myself every damn day? When you're assessing whether or not this is a job that you want to quit and the workplace is the problem, ask yourself, what lights me up here and what drains me? What invisible rules am I following that aren't actually in my job description? Where am I maybe over-functioning to prove that I am good enough? And where am I under-functioning because I'm already resentful and maybe burnt out? You deserve to be very clear about what patterns, behaviors, personalities you might be showing up to work with that will follow you and haunt you into your next job if you don't do something to address them before you quit. Because I promise you, you will keep repeating these unconscious patterns no matter how wonderful and fantastic the work environment is. Because you might get a super cushy job after leaving a horrible one, right? And a fantastic job. Maybe the hours are shorter, the people are nice, everything is fantastic. But if you still have people-pleasing tendencies that give you anxiety because you feel like you're not doing enough at work, you might not manifest that at a job, but you might keep those people-pleasing tendencies and start showing up differently in your personal relationships, in your romantic relationships. When you no longer have this enemy to antagonize at work, when the job is no longer your biggest problem, but you still have unconscious issues within that are begging for you to look at them, you might start projecting that problem onto other areas of your life. You might have to choose a new enemy to fight against because the real person you're trying to fight is the human within that is begging for attention, that has needs that haven't been met, and that has patterns of behavior that are not serving them long term. And they're trying to let you know that. And one of the ways that we see that happen is at this job that we spend a bulk of our time. When people come to me asking me if they should quit their job, typically they fall into two camps of motivation. The first is that they are not feeling challenged in their current role. They want upward mobility, or they want to be doing different work, right? There's something that is no longer mentally stimulating about it for them. Like, their job is fine, nothing bad is happening, but they're not seeing future fulfillment in this role. They might not even be seeing current fulfillment in that role. That's one type. The other concern that people come to me with is that something actively negative is happening to them because of this job. So maybe they are having restless anxiety when they go home. They're thinking about their job after hours. They're staying up late. They're working too long. They're stressed because their boss is an awful human being. Or, God forbid, they're being actively harassed at work and they're being maltreated, right? They're not being well taken care of at the job. So they want to leave because there are antagonistic conditions there. And there are conditions that they are taking home with them, right? There's a secondary effect to the job kind of leaching into their personal life, and it is actively negatively impacting them, not just not adding to their life. So consider which of these types, which of these reasons might be applicable to you. And recognize that this question of for what purpose applies to both of you. It's not just a matter of listing all the reasons the job sucks. It's taking ownership of the fact that you have been showing up in a way that has let this job suck the life out of you. Especially if you're that category of someone who wants to leave because they're treating you like shit. But also, if you're in the category of you're bored, what are you expecting of your job that might be unrealistic to provide you? No job has ever brought me soup. No business card has ever held my hand. No line on my resume has ever given me comfort when a breakup happened. I really want you to consider, what do you value in this life? What will make it feel worth living? And what will you remember by the end? Right? I'm going to share a story about why it's so important to know your why, to know for what purpose, and not just to pay rent, but to know what your values are that are driving your desire to live this life. There are 2 times in my last job where my values around family and my grandmother and flexibility made the decision for me. 3 years ago, I am sitting at home, just chugging along, filling out spreadsheets, vibing with music in the background, working from home as one does, and I get a call from my uncle who tells me that my grandmother has had a stroke and she survived and she's at the hospital. At this point, she is a 7-hour drive away from where I am working. I say, thank you. What hospital is she at? I hang up the phone. And as I am packing my bag, I call my boss and I say, hey, boss, I'm driving to Cleveland. I'll bring my work laptop. And any work that I need to do, I will do from there. Just wanted to let you know, my grandmother had a stroke. This is why I'm heading to Cleveland. And luckily, they were gracious and fantastic. And they said, of course, go ahead. Let us know if you need anything. They reacted so fantastically. But I want to call your attention to what I didn't do that I think a lot of us would do. I did not ask. I did not call and say, hey, boss, can I please maybe take time off if you'll let me? Like, I would really like to go home and see my grandmother. I'd really like to be able to do this. Would you please let me go honor a value and see my grandmother who might be dying right now? I did not phrase it as a question because that was a non-negotiable for me. Me leaving and going to be with my grandmother, non-negotiable. This is so important to me. I don't care what you do. This is what's going to happen. So I didn't give him the option. I said, I'm leaving. You can call it leave. You can call it time off. You can do whatever you want. I'm bringing my laptop. This is not up for discussion. My conviction and my values not only set the tone for that conversation and every decision I made thereafter, but it also sets the tone today in how people treat me, in what boundaries they know they can and cannot cross with me, because I'm so clear in where my values lie, in what motivates me, in what my priorities are. Because I know what my priorities are, my decision making becomes so freaking easy. Another time this came up is when I decided to leave the military. They offered me a year-long deployment, and I said no very quickly. And some people, past version of me, might have been like, oh my gosh, the adventure, go to a foreign country. But at this point, I knew how old my grandmother was. I knew how old my father was. I knew what their health status was. And I also knew that having the flexibility to be able to go see them at the drop of a hat at the moment's notice was incredibly important to me, especially because I'd already been gone for a year previously. I'd lived most of my life away from my family. I wanted to be there. And I wanted to be able to react and to take care of them. And so when you gave me an option that was like, well, you could leave for a year, my answer was no. How is this relevant to you? Because you might be sitting here thinking, oh, I don't know. I'm indecisive. I don't know whether or not I should quit. That tells me, quite frankly, you don't quite know what's a number one priority to you right now. You don't quite know what is the most important thing in your life, the second most important thing in life, the third most important thing. You being undecided means you haven't dug deep enough to figure out what is it that you want right now. And that's okay. It's normal to not know what you want. I want to normalize the indecision, but I want to be clear that there is an answer. And the more time you spend digging into, with honest perspective, what that answer might be, what do you actually give a shit about? When you give yourself the answer to that question, the decision makes itself on its own. You don't need to be indecisive about anything anymore. You will know whether or not the job is worth keeping or staying or leaving or going. Now, say you're being mistreated at work. If you're being mistreated at work and you still don't know whether or not you should quit, then you have to ask yourself, if it's between a paycheck and being respected at work, what is my sense of self-respect worth? Can I find other ways of being respected at work without quitting my job? What am I tolerating at work that I certainly maybe don't need to tolerate? Right? What boundaries can I set at work so this doesn't happen? And maybe push them to fire me if they fucking want to. But set enough boundaries that I keep protecting myself and honoring myself. Because the reason you're afraid to quit your job in that moment is because you're trying to protect your safety, right? You want financial security. Now, mind you, the only reason you need and want financial security in your head is because we live in an economy where we don't think we'll be supported and safe if we let go of our need to produce, because we have not learned how to build a village and a community that will take us in and support us no matter what as we get back on our feet. Because we have only learned how to contribute in a way that lets other people profit and exploit our labor and increase their profit margins. So because that is our only definition of financial security, we don't know how to quit our job just because we're being disrespected. It becomes an indecisive choice of, well, I don't know, they're treating me like shit, but I like the paycheck. What does it say about your sense of self-worth that you take more value in a paycheck than you do in the version of you that deserves respect? You are saying that the version of you that would normally be well treated in a place of employment is worth less than a certain amount of money that you receive every month. What you have done is you've put a price tag on your self-worth, not just on your dignity, on your pride, but literally on who you are as a human being. That's the wake-up call for people who dislike their job and who are antagonized by it and who are maybe poorly treated in it. The same wake-up call is going to come to you, folks who think that your job is boring and unsatisfying to you right now. What expectations have you set on your job to fulfill for you? Maybe you're expecting upward mobility. Maybe you're expecting to feel challenged and you're expecting to feel an opportunity for growth, or you want a newer title, or you want a higher salary, you want a promotion. Still, ask yourself, for what purpose? What will that promotion do for you? What will that promotion make you feel? What do you love about having a new title? Is it the novelty? Are you just chasing a new experience? Or is there a certain part of your ego that wants to be fluffed up and scratched by having a new title and padding your resume with something new? Oftentimes, when we feel like we want something more for ourselves, we have to do the hard job of inquiring, why do I feel like I am not good enough with the status quo? Why do I think I am not good enough as I am with the current salary, the current promotion, the current level of work that I'm putting forth? When did I decide that I needed to be working harder and I had to be challenged in order for my life to have meaning between the hours of 8 and 5? And you might say, well, Hélène, we as humans, we are built and destined for improvement. We want to grow. Sure. Why does that have to be in your career? Why does that have to be in service of exploitative capitalism? What part of you are you still tethering to this identity of your job, your career is the most important and valuable thing about your life? Now, I know I'm sounding very extreme. I'm sounding very harsh right now. And I want to promise you that I was absolutely on the other side of that. My resume is sick as hell. I got a padded resume. The truth of the matter is my salary never held me when my mom died. The lines on my resume and my degrees never comforted me when something went wrong. They never fed me. They never took care of me. They never listened to me or laughed or made a joke that made me laugh. At the end of the day, you have to realize that it's just words on a piece of paper. And if you want it to be more than words on a piece of paper, you have to figure out what those words actually mean to you. Even the pursuit of upward mobility. Okay, for what purpose? To what end? Right? Do you have dreams of being a CEO? Why? Because you want to lead? Because you want to take care of people? Because you have a mission? Because you have a vision? Those are all acceptable answers. You just need to have one. Here's where all of the answers to your questions become relevant and matter and purposeful. You can be a leader outside of your job. Everything that you are asking your job to do for you, you can get outside of that place of employment. But you've been conditioned not to. You've been conditioned by society to seek all forms of validation, affirmation, and reassurance from this 8 to 5, from the thing that provides you your W-2. I won't even get into the fact that your health care, your benefits, this health insurance that you have is tied to your job and to your workforce, not just because they want to encourage you to work in this society so that you can literally survive and get health care. I'm looking at American society specifically, but also it has roots in systemic racism. And so it's born out of segregation, wanting to keep people apart and not wanting to treat people of color. And so because of that, groups have organized and lobbied so that healthcare would become tied to your employer and not something that is an inalienable right that the country would provide for you. So even when we ask for what purpose of our society, for what purpose was this law written, I want you asking, why are the rules that I am so committed to following the way that they are? When did I decide these were the rules that I would live my life by? And did I make that decision? Or did someone else make it for me? And do I have to keep following that rule? What rule would I rewrite if I could? And let the answer to that let you explore how can you start living by those rules in the current container that you're in, at your current job. So some of you might be resentful of your job because you're realizing how much time you're spending there and how much energy it's taking from you. The issue isn't always just to cut off the energy leak. It's not just that you're outsourcing your labor. You are outsourcing your entire identity to your job. And this is where the trap tightens. This is why the solution to having lost yourself to your work is to diversify your identity. What do I mean by that? I mean, just like a portfolio and a financial portfolio and stocks, you want to diversify what areas of your life bring you fulfillment. So that if you lose your job tomorrow, you don't feel like your life is over. The reason I am so passionate about this topic is because in my past as a criminal investigator for the Air Force, it was my job to investigate death investigations. So anytime a military member died within our jurisdiction, basically, we had to investigate that death. Now, for those true crime lovers, you might be like, oh my gosh, there must be so much murder. There must be such intrigue. It must be so fascinating. First of all, there is no glory in death. It's sad as hell no matter how you splice it. Worse still is that most of the death investigations I investigated were self-inflicted. They were suicide. It was really my job to understand why it had happened. There were 3 main reasons that I saw why people chose to end their life. The first was loss of the job or fear of losing their job because maybe they were under investigation of some sort. The second was the loss of a relationship, as in a divorce or someone breaking up with them. And a third catalyst for this was some sort of financial fear, debt, obligation, some sort of scarcity happening in their life where they were losing finances. And there's a lot of shame involved in all of those kinds of experiences. And there's nothing more heartbreaking than realizing so much of the violence that I witnessed, that I investigated, whether self-inflicted or inflicted upon others, could have been prevented. All of those things were because someone had placed their entire sense of self and self-worth and their identity, their reason for being, their raison d'être, as the French would say, in something outside of themselves, but also in other people, like relationships, in their job that is out of their control, and in money, which is inherently a transient thing. It is a tangible item because I can tell you it's just a job. Right? But when, especially something like the military, where your entire identity is tied to this ethos, this culture, to literally you put on a uniform, like every aspect of your personality is tied to this system that you've subscribed to and sworn an oath to. You are literally saying, I will give my whole life to this cause. When this cause goes away, when this job, because it is still just a job that pays you a salary, when that goes away, and you feel like you have lost all sense of purpose, that doesn't tell me that that job was so fucking incredible. Because most of the time it's not. If the job were better and more incredible and had better friends and better connections, maybe some of this could have been prevented, right? So when you hear me rage against capitalism, it comes from a place of desperate desire to prevent harm. Because I don't believe that people should feel shame for not doing something that is not inherent in being a human frickin' being. We are built for small villages, small communities, connection, and to reduce all of the multitudes that we encompass to what is your salary, how well do you perform, what are your KPIs, and what can you do for this company? How can we exploit your labor and your identity for our bottom line? That's what breaks my heart. That's what enrages me. That's what I think you don't have to tolerate. That's what makes me say, what the hell, N, right? It's bullshit. And you might still be fully bought into that bullshit, and that's okay, so long as you know why. So long as you recognize that the sense of purpose and identity that you have is tethered to something outside of yourself, and that your job could leave you tomorrow. And I want to make sure that you are set up so that you still think your life is worth living. So if you end up homeless or on the street or don't have any money and can't pay rent and you have nowhere to go, that you still think you are worthy of being alive, that you still believe that you are worthy of being loved and worthy of being seen and worthy of being taken care of. Because that's what I believe. That your employment status, your housing status is not a measure of your worth as a human being. That you do not need to produce or do anything on this planet. I don't see you as a pawn or a tool to make something else better. I truly believe that you are worthy as you are, doing nothing. Now, that is a hard frickin' concept for most people to wrap their head around because it requires a lot of unlearning. It requires a lot of unlearning, not just like socially, but spiritually, energetically, mentally. It's a fucking knot to untie, and it's taken me years to get here. But that's what I believe. And so that's why I'm passionate as hell about this. And it's not wrong if you think differently. It makes perfect sense that you think differently right now. Either way, I'm going to prepare you. By diversifying your identity, you are preparing yourself to let your life look like the multitudes you already encompass and support you in that way. So questions to ask yourself. First of all, do I have an identity outside of what I do? When someone asks, what do you do I only talk about work? Or do I bring up hobbies? Maybe I bring up qualities and characteristics about myself. Or do I just talk about my job and my title? Where do I most feel like me and myself? And how often do I let myself be myself? You deserve personal fulfillment even if you're under-resourced. Here are things that are going to help you get resources beyond diversifying your identity. Make sure that you have a support system that you can call on, a real support system, not just someone whose business card you got at the last networking event, but someone that you can call when you need to crash on their couch, or if you ended up in the hospital, who would you call? Right? Those are the people that you should have more than one of. These are the people with whom you build connection through vulnerability, through audacity, through your authenticity. This is how you build a village, the village that they tried to strip away from you, but that is going to keep you safe when the governmental structures fall apart. When we all lose our job, what do we have left? Each other, our creativity, our imagination, our resourcefulness, our ability to collaborate and share. And so build your support system now. Build a web that is there at every stage of your life, no matter what happens, for different purposes maybe, for different aspects of your personality. But build that system now. Have that in place. As I mentioned, you should have a key understanding of what your values are, what your priorities are, what your non-negotiables are. What boundaries will you maintain at this next job that you are seeking? Right? What do you want to prioritize? Maybe you don't even want another job. Maybe you want to go explore or travel or take a month and go home and be with your parents. Maybe that's what's a priority to you. That's okay. Release the shame around that. You should also have a decent understanding of financial literacy and good wisdom when it comes to your own finances. This is a really good time to get lean and get very clear on what expenses you have that are not as necessary as others. Because what I would hate for you to see is for you to change jobs or change a promotion thinking more money or a different title is going to change your whole life, and you keep exhibiting those same behaviors and patterns and mishandling the resources that you've now been given. Have enough financial literacy, and again, having that honest conversation with yourself and your bank accounts to see what can you actually afford. Because maybe now is not the right time to quit your job because it's boring. Maybe now is the right time to build an emergency fund so that if and when the job quits on you, you already know what you need to spend, where you need to spend it, what your values are, who you can call on, and all the other aspects of your life that have reinforced that your identity is more than one thing. Now, say you've already decided to quit your job. You looked at your reasons and you're like, yeah, I just want to go. Before you submit that notice, I want you to start what I call this exit energy before you exit. I want you to start acting as if you had just been fired. You don't have to blow it all up overnight, but you do need to stop shrinking inside of your role just to make it tolerable. Oftentimes what happens is when we're maltreated, before we reach this pinnacle level of burnout, we just tend to either not give a shit, sit quietly, and we just kind of take it. We start becoming less noticeable. We start hiding more. We don't want people to call attention to us because we don't have to deal with them. So we start concealing ourselves. And what I'm telling you is you should do the opposite. If you've already decided, damn the consequences, I'm quitting this job, then damn the consequences for real. Why not actually finally give yourself permission to be this unfiltered version of yourself, this authentic version of yourself, the one that maybe is a little bit bolder, that speaks their mind, that documents things the way that they want to, that sends that email with fewer exclamation points and smiley faces. Beyond bringing a different energy to work, there are tactical and practical things that you can do that will start teaching yourself that you can take ownership of any situation you work in, that there is some power and control that you have in how you show up to work. Even if everyone else around you is miserable and an awful human being, there are certain things that you can do. First and foremost, try shifting one boundary this week. Literally anything that buys you back time or your dignity. Say no to something that maybe in the past you would have said yes to. Right? I talked in the last episode how to kind of rearrange priorities and how to manage our own energy and stop taking on more than we need to, because our hypercompetence is not going to get rewarded. So shift one boundary this week. It can be at work, it can be at home. You might decide, hey, I'm not going to eat my lunch at my desk, or I'm actually going to clock out at 6 p.m. And if one of those caseloads has to get pushed to tomorrow, it gets pushed to tomorrow. If someone else has to take on that caseload, so be it, right? Because essentially the company doesn't really care who's sitting in that spot. They just care that the work gets done, right? How can I start showing up as though I were advocating for the version of me that got fired, but wanted to advocate for myself all along? Start showing up like that version of you. So speak up at least once this week where you normally wouldn't. Maybe experiment with showing up to a project or a meeting as your unfiltered self, or handling a project maybe a way that you've always wanted to, but never gave yourself a chance to. I know I'm asking you a lot of questions, but I've got one more. What would showing up to this job from a place of desire instead of duty look like? Because maybe, sure, you dislike most of the things you have to do on a day-to-day basis, but maybe there's one thing that you do enjoy doing. There's one task that you love. Maybe it's the customer service, maybe it's sending that email, maybe it's writing up that spreadsheet, or maybe it's getting bagels with your coworker. Right? Try to show up to work focusing on that one thing that you love about it and not all the things that you hate. And see how you show up differently when you come in rooted and motivated in desire. And track and notice how those things, right? Setting the boundaries, speaking up, saying no, experimenting, how all of those behaviors might shift your experience in that job and might shift the clarity in answering the question, should I quit my job? Capitalism is real, rent is due, but that doesn't mean you need to betray yourself in order to get paid. Consider what you want to do next with your time and your energy. Not just for the sake of the salary, but because your life is precious, you could die tomorrow, and you deserve to know that the way that you spent your time on this earth aligned with how you wanted to. So it's not just about YOLO and fuck everybody else and you only live once. It's about recognizing that you deserve to take pride in how you show up every single day. And so where do you want to show up in such a way that you can still rest easy at night and take pride in yourself and not be anxious and not hate yourself and not feel shame or blame or any kind of problem, but genuinely be comfortable in your own skin doing whatever it is that you do? Lastly, I want you to release the shame that you might be holding around not having income. We have literally vilified unemployment in this country as though to have a job is the most worthwhile thing you could ever have. Not love, not a family, not a friend you can call at 2 a.m. when the shit hits the fan. We haven't glorified those things, even though we will profit off of the entertainment of watching people find love on a TV show. We will gladly make money off of making people unconsciously chase something that we do not allow them to have in the society. But God forbid we let people actually out loud value those things more than having a form of employment. So release the shame around needing income or needing time or needing to be unemployed, whatever it is that you need, whether it's a part-time job, whether it's to be unemployed and file for unemployment, whether it's to crash on a friend's couch and ask for help. Release the shame around that because you are still trying to survive in a system that was not designed with your personal fulfillment in mind. It was designed with profit in mind of the very select few. It was not designed with you in mind. So everything you do is going to feel freaking hard until you get to a place where you can release not just the rules and the expectations, but the shame you have about not following them. That's what's going to make you feel more free. And in this case, freedom does not mean quitting with no plan. It means deciding that you will never again stay somewhere just because you forgot you have a choice. So remembering that every way that we show up is a choice. Along with recognizing these patterns, you also deserve to understand what are the other unconscious beliefs or standards and expectations you've held for yourself that have gotten you into this position in the first place, right? So hopefully this episode has given you a lot of questions for introspection. It might have jostled you a little bit. It might have woken you up and might have been the sound of a blaring alarm when you wanted to snooze, and that's okay. Maybe you come back to this episode when you're ready. Maybe when you're ready to do the deeper work, you listen to it and listen to it through a new lens. I know that I've talked about all of the difficulty that comes with this contemplation, this consideration, but I want to also share that there's a lot of joy to be found when you either accept that a job is just a job and serves all of your other hobbies and needs and allows you to build a fulfilling life, even if your job isn't the only source of fulfillment you have. And there's also joy in being able to advocate for yourself, to be self-respecting in whatever employment you're in, or to take on that really hard consulting job that makes you work 100 hours a week, but you make so much money that you never have to work again. All of these options are totally fine because you have to know what those options reflect and mean to you. What do they represent to you that you would have money a year from now that could mean financial freedom for you, right? But you deserve to know for what purpose that financial freedom is really serving. Is it to relax? Is it to spend time with your family? Is it to read more books by the pool? Fantastic. Start reading books by the pool tomorrow. Start spending more time with your family tomorrow. Do things that you're putting off till after the next job, till after the next promotion, till after you quit. Start doing them now. Why are you delaying your joy? Why are you delaying your pleasure? Why are you delaying your fulfillment until something happens with one aspect of your life, which is the career? There are a lot of fun, free things to do that do not require money or a salary, folks. And if you want a list of them, my God, please just Google it. There's so many free events going on in your town right now. And there's nothing more free or fulfilling than having a nice long chat with your friend on your front porch or on a sidewalk, or what I like to call a car talk, which is when you end up sitting in your car having driven someone home, and instead of get out of the car, you accidentally sit in the driveway with the engine running for 2 hours straight, catching up. Those moments are precious. More precious than any line on my resume. Those moments are what are going to sustain you when the world falls apart. And those moments are what are going to bring you joy and sustain you when you're remembering why this life is worth living in the first place. This life gets to be full of pleasure and personal fulfillment, regardless of your accolades, not because of them. If this is something that you are looking to be held accountable to, if you want a place to help remember yourself, to be held accountable to your joy, to your pleasure, if maybe you've done some of this deeper work and you've been to therapy and you understand your behavioral patterns, but now you just want to actually do something about it. You want to actually swap out productivity for pleasure. I would love to welcome you into my world. Consider if either of my programs, The Reclamation or Free Radicals, might be for you. The Reclamation is my one-on-one container where I help folks redefine success in a way that aligns with their values. Usually for people who are really successful on paper, but are starting to feel a little empty and hollow on the inside, realizing that they've been climbing ladders that simply were not built for them. And we break down what are all the pillars of personal fulfillment that you deserve to be pouring into so that your life can feel sustainably successful on your own terms, so you can make room for all of this joy. And if you know that you have an understanding of what you want, but my God, do you just need people who get it? Do you need a community that can see you and witness you? I have this beautiful group program called the Free Radicals. The Free Radicals is an intimate group where we help each other feel seen in the messy middle of trying to figure this life out, where we change the world slowly but surely by letting the revolution start within. In the Free Radicals, you will make bold your new baseline. You will be not only held accountable to your joy and your pleasure, but also to the sacred self-care rituals that are not a nice to have after you burn out. They're not just a matter of bubble baths. They are how you sustain yourself so that you can not just pour into others, but so that you can inspire others to create the change in the world that you are seeking. This is about leadership and a beautiful little rebellious revolution because you've started to take yourself and the collective liberation seriously. And you're not going to do it by hustling harder and working harder and being more productive. You've decided to do this by chasing and choosing pleasure at every turn, knowing that when you show up more resourced, those around you can lean on you that much more dutifully, that you get to be a part of someone else's web and that you get to help them when they fall on hard times. You get to start being the villager that you are desperate for the village to have. So if you're ready to have a radically honest, fully expressed life, please check out the show notes below and let me know if you have any questions. You might need support to help you remember how to want more for yourself, but you don't need to quit your job in order to start showing up as yourself. That can start today. And if you do need to quit, it helps to not do that in isolation. If you need support, I'm here down below. Thank you for listening. This has been What the Hélène. I'll see you in the next episode.